Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Startup Sense podcast. This is your host, Jonah Lupton. Thank you so much for joining us for another great episode today. On the phone, we have Will Ahmed. He is the co-founder of a company called Whoop. They are based in Boston, approximately 42 employees. They're essentially a performance optimization platform or system for athletes, professional teams, college teams, and even some other, amateurs and individuals. Company's raised about $25 million from some really, really good investors. We'll get into that in a second. He started the company in 2012 while he was a student at Harvard, I believe. We'll get into that as well. And let's welcome him to the show. Will, how are you, man?
Hey, Jonah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So I didn't want to go into the description of the company too deep because I want you to tell us in your own words, what exactly does Whoop do?
Well, our mission at Whoop is really to unlock human performance. We believe that every individual has an inner potential that you can tap into if you can monitor certain things about their physiology. And, for me personally, I got into this space because I was playing squash while I was at Harvard, and I was really into sports and exercise in general. But I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing to my body while I was exercising, while I was training. And so what I ended up doing with a lot of physiology research while I was in school, and I met with cardiologists and physiologists, and I read hundreds of medical papers, which, by the way, was unfamiliar territory because I was a government concentrator while I was an undergrad. But I did all this science research, and I found that there were specific things that you could measure about the human body that could really help you tap into performance. And so today at Whoop, we've built a system across hardware, software, and analytics that's really designed to understand the human body. And we work today with some of the best athletes in the world, professional athletes and teams, collegiate athletes and teams. We work with Olympians, folks like the Navy SEALs. So really, really high end. And then more recently, we launched a product that's targeting your aspirational athletes. So people like high school athletes or fitness enthusiasts or endurance competitors. So really, it's an overall system to understand the body, and it helps an individual optimize for recovery, prevent injuries, prevent overtraining, and positions an individual to perform at a higher level.
Now, when you first started building this with your co-founders back in 2012 and 2013, were you gearing this towards the professional athletes? Like what segment of the market did you really want to go after first?
Yeah, so just as a quick background on how I met John and Aurelian, so I did a lot of physiology research while I was in school, and then I met John Capilupo, our CTO now, and he was a sophomore actually at Harvard at the time, and as it turned out, he was studying some of the hardest math classes in the country, and his father is a professor of exercise physiology. So John and I had a real overlap around physiology, and he had the technical chops to do some things from a sensing standpoint that hadn't been done before. And I had a vision for how we could build a product targeting coaches and athletes. And so the two of us started working together at the Harvard Innovation Lab. This would have been summer of 2012. And we're coming up with all these different ideas around how we think we could do monitoring, but neither of us had a hardware background. And I said to John, John, it'd be great if we could do some sort of rapid prototyping on this. And he said, funny enough, there's this guy who's sleeping on my couch right now. I think something didn't work out for his job. Turns out he's a really good mechanical engineer. Should I bring him down? And so sure enough, the next day, Aurelian Nikolai comes down to the Harvard Innovation Lab. And as it would turn out, Aurelian was this brilliant 3D prototyper, nicknamed King of the 3D Prototyper at Harvard. And so he very quickly was able to help us develop prototypes around doing monitoring of the human body. And so John and Aurelian, became my co-founders, and John ended up dropping out of Harvard that fall, and Aurelian had just graduated with me. So the three of us started working together at the Harvard Innovation Lab, and this is sort of late 2012. And initially our vision, and it stayed true to this day, was that we needed to provide a product that could better understand the human body and connect coaches and athletes to share data, right? Because one of my issues when I was a college athlete was that you had, a coach coming up with a practice plan where every single day 20 or 30 or 40 athletes were doing the same plan. And what I believed is it should be much more individualized and nuanced based on the status or the physiology of every specific individual, which is, of course, what we offer today to teams. And so we had this vision from the very beginning to work with the best athletes in the world, and we believed if we could build the product that we were envisioning, they would come, and that largely turned out to be true.
So how are you guys gathering the data on each athlete? What I assume it's wearables, right? And what kinds of wearables?
Right. So we've developed a small device that encompasses 5 sensors that are sampling data at 100 times per second. So it's the most granular data set that you'll find on the human body. And this device can be worn on your wrist, it can be worn on your forearm, it can be worn on your upper arm. So it's really a very small sensor from that standpoint. And it's largely material that allows you to wear it. So it's very comfortable, and you never need to take it off because we actually invented a modular charger that allows you to charge it without taking it off your body. And the key readouts from Whoop, although we're collecting, data across 5 sensors, 100 times a second, we're collecting about 100 megabytes of data on a person per day, which is just an insane amount of data. The key readouts are specifically around strain and recovery. So you can think of strain as the intensity of a workout or the intensity of your overall day. And you can think of recovery as how prepared your body is for strain. So if your body is run down and you have a low recovery, we recommend you should take on less strain. And if your body has a high recovery, we recommend you should take on more strain. And as it turns out, if you have a low recovery and you take on a lot of strain and you do this day over day, then you're overtraining your body. So we're able to tell an individual or a coach for that matter, hey, this is how recovered your body is, and this is what we recommend you should do to your body as a result. And then, over the course of the day, someone will accumulate strain in the form of exercise or activities. And even at the end of the day, we'll look at the strain that's accumulated on your body, and we'll tell you how much sleep you need to recover for tomorrow. So it's very actionable, and we really summarize the whole world in terms of strain and recovery.
So back in, when you guys started this, you had a lot of hurdles to overcome, hardware, software, data, science, the list goes on. Where did you guys actually start? What did you build first?
Well, we really started with the problem, right? And if I were to simplify the problem, I would say it was my own personal experience as someone who would overtrain as an athlete. So here I am dedicating 3 or 4 hours a day to exercise so that I can perform at my highest level. And then all of a sudden I would go through these periods of my body just being run down and fatigued and exhausted. So a lot of the lens was, okay, how could I just solve that problem? How could I prevent an athlete from overtraining? And so I did a lot of the physiology research, and I would say that the science came first from that standpoint, right? Because there was a problem that had to do with physiology. And so the first application is, okay, well, what's the physiology, what's the science behind this problem, and how can you understand it? And then, thinking more broadly about the problem, overtraining is really just an imbalance between strain and recovery, right? Okay, so we need to be able to monitor strain, and we need to be able to monitor recovery. And of course, if we're monitoring recovery, we need to be able to monitor sleep. So those were really the 3 buckets. And then from there, we started looking at, okay, what are all the data points that were required to understand strain, to understand recovery, to understand sleep? And then once you understand those data points, it's looking at, okay, how do you collect those data points? So then that's the transition from science really to hardware to sensing, right? Where now, okay, you need to be able to monitor things like heart rate continuously and accurately. You need to measure something called heart rate variability, which is this fascinating lens into your nervous system. You need to be able to measure things about skin temperature and the temperature environment in order to better understand how well you're sleeping or the effect of exercise. You need to understand movement because that affects exercise. It also applies to sleep. So, you keep backing into these things. And then once you understand all the things that you have to sense, you have to think about how do you package it. So that was really when we were building prototypes and packaging sensors together. And then you have to develop algorithms on top of those sensors to make sure that you're actually getting accurate data from the sensors, right? And it's usable data, right? And then once you've got usable data, you have to combine that data to come up with algorithms for things like strain and for things like recovery, for things like sleep. And then you have to calibrate that data against gold standards. So, we compare our heart rate monitoring to an electrocardiogram or to a chest strap. We compare our sleep staging to a PSG machine, which is, what you do at a sleep study, a sleep clinic. And then you have to keep iterating on those things. And by the way, none of that even speaks to how the hell do you get users to use this data and make it actionable, which is really the product focus. And from the very beginning, I was worried about the product from a design standpoint, because no matter how compelling the data is that you collect, it has to be simple to use, and you have to have people understand what they're doing with the data. So actually the first person that I recruited was our lead designer, after John and Aurelian. And he's a total stud, one of the best information graphics designers in the world, and I can go into that whole story. But anyway, you understand these layers, right, are pretty critical.
This is Jonah Lupton, founder of Jewel and host of the Startup Sense podcast. At Jewel, we help entrepreneurs and startup founders build, launch, and grow their companies by providing superior technology, marketing, and consulting services. We help clients of all sizes, budgets, and industries. We put our clients in the best position to raise capital, grow revenues, hire employees, and maximize their profits. For more information or to set up a free consultation with our team, please visit our website at jool.net. That's JOOL.net. Now, do the players and athletes appreciate all this data up front, or are they really being convinced by either someone on your team or the coaches or the trainers? I mean, how are you guys getting this technology into their hands in the first place?
Well, now it's sort of, as you know, like once you build out a sales team and you've got teams using it, then it's sort of, you build a machine, right, where you've got leads and you've got follow-ups and, whatever. And so the good news, though, is that athletes who wear the product see value in it. I mean, so much so that we have players in the NBA secretly wearing Whoop during NBA games, risking getting fined by the league because they see so much value in the data.
Wow.
And that was another thing that we had to get right from the beginning, which we didn't talk about. It's just the whole privacy of this data, right? As data gets more interesting, the privacy associated with it gets more important. And, we're collecting data that has really powerful implications around how well a player is going to perform, what a player is doing, whether it be their nightlife, whether it be, their overall health. And so we had to think a lot about the privacy levels to make a coach and an athlete feel empowered, right? And so we built a lot of it from the standpoint of athlete empowerment, where we believe that every individual athlete should have access to all of his or her own data. And we also believe that athletes should be able to determine how much of that data is shared with a coach or a trainer. So what we like to do is we onboard the athletes first, and then we work with the teams to find the optimal sharing levels. And as you know, Jonah, I mean, privacy is like the furthest thing from binary, right? It's like there's just millions of gradations in between, and if there's anything we've learned from social networks, right? It's not that it's like all or nothing. It's the many layers in between. And so with Whoop, we actually built 27 layers of privacy to make a coach and an athlete feel comfortable with that data exchange.
Right, because I would assume that, this data can be very personal to athletes, and in the wrong hands, it could be dangerous, meaning whether it's negotiating a new contract, whether it's, people that are betting on, the outcome of games, things like that. This data obviously has a lot of value to it. So I'm glad that you guys take privacy seriously. And it was funny because today on ESPN or SportsCenter, I was watching an episode where they were talking about how athletes in general, it was mostly exclusive to the NBA. They are, they're paying more attention to their sleeping habits, their drinking habits, their eating habits, knowing that those three things really affect their performance. And I'm assuming that Whoop is going to be part of that conversation in the near future. Now, you guys have relationships right now with Major League Baseball and the NCAA, correct?
Yeah, look, we work with athletes and teams across every professional sports league and every NC2A conference. So we have seen a breadth of sports, of levels of competitiveness, age groups, you name it. And I'd say the one thing that holds all of our athletes together, it doesn't matter if you're LeBron James and a professional basketball player or a college fencer. The thing that's going to hold you together is how well are you recovering. And to your point, this has been a reoccurring theme in sports recently, is what can athletes do to recover better? And if you're not measuring recovery, then you don't really care about recovery, right? So the first step is you have to measure it if you think it's valuable. And that's, we've seen just overwhelming movement in that direction. And that tends to be the thing that people really latch on to about Whoop. I'd say it's the thing that differentiates us the most in the market is our deep understanding of recovery and our ability to present that to an athlete or to a coach. Like, I'll give you an example. We have a point guard in the NBA who, when he has a high recovery, he's averaging 22 points per night, 1 turnover, and he's shooting 52% field goal percentage. When he has a low recovery on Whoop, he's averaging 18 points per night, 8 turnovers, and he's shooting 35% field goal percentage.
Wow.
So literally, whether or not this guy has a high recovery or a low recovery, he's like two different athletes. And when you show that information to an athlete, it resonates. It's like, wow, if I can just keep my recovery high, if I keep care of my body, like, I'm going to perform at a higher level. And so for a lot of athletes, the unbelievable thing is that they've never monitored their sleep. They've never monitored their recovery. We've worked with hundreds of players across minor league baseball, and I've seen guys who are literally half a step away from being, the next Derek Jeter, and they spend 9 hours in bed, Jonah, and they get 3 hours of sleep. I mean, that's the equivalent of playing drunk, right? This guy's like on the cusp of being in Major League Baseball, and he's playing drunk, right? So it's like there's such an opportunity for athletes to understand their bodies with this data, and I just think it's so important. And obviously, that's why I'm excited about what we're doing.
Talk about your fundraising. So, like I said in the intro, you guys have raised about $25 million from some very well-known VC firms. According to Crunchbase, it looks like you guys raised your first capital in early 2013. Can you kind of take us back to then?
Well, we followed, I think, a somewhat natural evolution from a fundraising standpoint, where the first capital was friends and family, and then we attracted some smart angel investors, people who had worked in sports or had built technology companies. A gentleman by the name of Nicholas Negroponte got very involved early on, and Nicholas is now a good friend, and he started the MIT Media Lab and like One Laptop Per Child and Wired Magazine. So, and he was very design centric. So we spent a lot of time thinking about just the usability of this product from the beginning, and then after the angel round, and then we raised a seed round from some well-known early stage investors. So people like Accomplice and Founder Collective and Promise Ventures and NextView Ventures and Collaborative Fund and some other really smart individuals, and then we raised a Series A that was led by Moose Partners. So Moose is the family office for Chanel, so they liked a lot of what we were doing from a design standpoint. And then And then, about a year or 15 months later, we raised a Series B from Two Sigma Ventures. And Two Sigma is a very data-centric firm. So, I like that because it gives the board dynamic a little balance. So you've got one group that's a little bit more, design point of view, another group that's a little bit more data point of view, and yeah, it's been great. We've had very supportive investors who have continued to follow on in financings, and I think we've been lucky from that standpoint.
That's always a good sign. Over the last 4 or 5 years since you've been working on this with your founders, what have been the biggest challenges for you guys? And I'm sure there's been a lot, but is there a couple that you could share with us?
Well, there's a lot of ways to think about that. I mean, just the overall end-to-end technology. We've really built the best technology for understanding the body, which is somewhat surreal to be able to say, given the sort of the behemoth companies in the space. But from the point of view of some of the best athletes in the world, and from our consumers, we've built really phenomenal technology, and I think that in itself had just so many layers of challenges, whether it's the data collection or the usability or the manufacturing, or it kind of goes on and on. I think another thing, though, that probably resonates more with your listeners is just I would say the personal challenge of learning how to run a company, right? I mean, Whoop, aside from a few internships, it's not just the first time I've been a CEO, it's really my first job. So, you learn a lot really fast, and you get thrown into, you just get thrown into it. And I think what's so important for aspiring entrepreneurs to understand is you can't compare yourself to successful entrepreneurs if you're a first-time founder. Because when they were in your shoes, they didn't know half as much as they know, today, right?
Right.
And you have to understand that you're going to grow with the company as well, right? You're going to learn how to manage, and you're going to learn how to, deal with investors and raise capital and attract customers and everything else. And so I think a lot of the process of being an entrepreneur is sort of building the understanding or the courage, if you will, to manage your own psyche. And another thing that I've noticed personally over time is that you get a lot more comfortable with the way that you're reacting to news, whether it's good or bad, right? In the very beginning, for Whoop, or I imagine any company, everything feels very volatile, right? There's these like huge swings that you feel like you're on a roller coaster, right?
It's hard not to get emotional over, when big things happen, good or bad. It's hard not to get emotional when you're the founder.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh, we just hired this guy. He's coming on. Oh, like he, turned down the offer, or the so and so quit, and it feels like 20% of your company just walked out the door. And on some level, it is 20% of your company because you're 5 people. But so there's that, and it's just like such an emotional roller coaster. And so what you come to learn over time is to just take things, I think, on a more even keeled level, right? Where the lows don't feel as low and the highs don't necessarily feel as high. And the other thing I think that goes with that is, and I've found this personally, where you're actually trying to be a little bit contrarian to everyone in your company. Because if everyone feels like things are going really well, then you need to start looking for the things that aren't necessarily going well. And if things are going poorly, then you need to be kind of the cheerleader who's saying, hey, this is how we're going to get through this, and this is why we're still going to be successful. And if there's anything I'm saying, it's that you learn balance, right? You really learn balance in I think every sort of meaning of the word in running a company. And you don't necessarily have to know that out of the gates. I imagine almost every CEO or founder doesn't.
What's been your recruiting strategy? I mean, you guys are in Boston. There's obviously a ton of talent, a lot of smart people up there. But it's a very competitive landscape. A lot of VC-backed companies that are competing for that talent. So how have you been able to find the right people to join the Whoop team?
Well, I think there's two things, right? One is how you attract people to your company, and then the other is how you sort of select them into your company, right? So in terms of attracting people to Whoop, I think we have an advantage in that there's just a lot of things for people to get excited about, like in sort of every different skill set, right? And it doesn't just have to be this whole mission around unlocking human performance, although I think that's an easy thing to get behind. But like I co-founded Whoop with two sort of self-admitted chain smokers who were overweight at the time. So it's not like it's not like everyone has to
Really?
be
Oh, that's
it's not like
hilarious.
everyone has to be a pro athlete. It's not like everyone has to be a pro athlete. And John will really laugh when I hear that. But it's not like everyone has to be a pro athlete to join Whoop. And nor should you try to position it that way, right? You don't just have to love sports and health monitoring, but maybe you're fascinated by the challenges associated with collecting 100 megabytes of data on a person per day, or the deep math and deep learning that we have to do to auto detect things about your daily life, or the marketing opportunity of leveraging some of these incredible assets or pro athletes that are using our product into telling a story that gets other people excited, or all the design awards that we've won, like thinking about design in a new way and how you can make this product something that's easy and comfortable to wear and never gets taken off the body. That has all sorts of challenges. Or hardware, like how do you make the thing smaller and cheaper to make, and how do you make it scalable, right? So I think the one important thing I've learned is don't just frame what's exciting about your business from the point of view of what excites you. Also think about what's going to be exciting to the person that you're looking for. So I think the pitch or the way to attract great people is also thinking about who they are and what they might be looking for. So then, once we attract people and we have a good process with them, you sort of have a thorough interview process, and I'm generally someone who likes to be pretty open-minded about hiring. Like I don't try to pigeonhole people. I think one advantage that a startup has over a big company is that you can hire people, not job descriptions, right? Like, and I mean that in the true sense. Like you can hire someone and then be creative about what role they grow into. I meet sometimes founders who tell me, we're going to hire a VP of this and a VP of this and a VP of this, and I think like to myself, well, you might not need those other two VPs depending on what that first VP looks like, right? So it's not it's like a shifting puzzle, if you will. It's not a fixed puzzle, right? Because one person that you bring on and empower, they'll grow into a role in a way maybe that you didn't expect, and then it changes slightly what the next person looks like in terms of hiring. And so I think that's really important as a mindset from sort of 5 to 20, employees as you grow. Then look, as you get bigger, then there are more specialized roles that you're looking for. But in general, I try to be the person who's sort of more open-minded about it, and I really like to get a good sense for what someone's looking for, and make sure that aligns. And then the other thing that I look for, and this is a little bit more, I guess, on the culture side, but I look for two really core attributes in someone. The first is sort of just a deep understanding or skill set or passion in any particular area, and the second is a high degree of humility. And what's interesting about that is when you're in an environment that's pretty fast moving and dynamic, and you've got a bunch of different divisions that are overlapping, what happens is, you put an iOS engineer and a firmware engineer and a product manager in a room, and each one of them had their own point of view on how this thing's going to integrate, and everyone comes to the table with a pretty strong opinion about it. But if everyone has a high degree of humility, then what you end up with is, the best outcome for the company, not sort of a focus on who came up with what idea. And so that's been, I think, pretty successful, at least as a lens for helping to for thinking about hiring people.
Now, how do you guys make money? On the website, I know that, people can purchase the Whoop strap for $500. Is that the same version? So is the consumer version the same as the pro athlete version?
So the team pro athlete version, what we like to call the elite system, is $1,200 per athlete per year. So it's a
Okay.
subscription where you're getting team analytics and concierge level service, and we like to do additional analysis as well, like on how performance in games correlates with recovery and sleep, for example, or how your travel schedule is affecting your sleep and recovery, things like that. So that's a higher end system, and then more recently we launched a consumer product, $500, and you get the same hardware and the same analytics that the best athletes in the world are using, and it can really push you as an individual to perform at a higher level.
It's so funny that I'm actually interviewing you today just based on, the NBA conversations right now about teams sitting there, some of their star players on the second night of a back to back, to try to rest them for the playoffs. I mean, you guys probably have data on what performance looks like, right, on the second night of a back to back for some of these players.
I mean, look, we've convinced teams to do it. I believe in it, right? Like it's a simple reality where you have players. Having the best players have longer careers is good for everyone. It's
Right.
good for the game. It's good for fans. It's good for teams. It's good for revenue. It makes the sport more competitive. But the way these schedules set up is not optimized for rest and recovery.
Oh, for no way. Right.
And look, and you got to look at some of the stuff in real time as well. It's hard to necessarily plan well in advance that you're going to sit someone. But if you've got a West Coast game that goes into double overtime and then you're traveling East Coast, you should think really hard about whether you're going to play your stars, because they are they're likely fatigued and overtrained.
Right. I feel like
And look, that's where the Whoop data comes in. I mean, just be objective about it. Okay, this guy got 2.5 hours of sleep. He's put up a recovery of 13%. Do you really want to play him and risk losing him for the rest of the season?
Right. Absolutely. No, I think the NBA, I think it is that data that's going to convince them that, back to back nights of games is going to have to go away. Teams on 5 or 6, they'll do 5 or 6 road games in a row, not necessarily back to back, but I mean, the Celtics this year, there was a streak where they were I think they had 5 or 6 away games. So they're sleeping in hotels, they're flying into new cities. Like you said, they're probably not getting enough sleep, and it's showing on the court. I mean, that's one reason that there's obviously a home field advantage, for all of these teams. So no, it's interesting. Very, very.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did this big study with Major League Baseball, and one of the things that we found, this was literally just this past summer. It was considered the largest performance study ever conducted by a pro sports league. We partnered with Major League Baseball, and what we found is that athletes on the away team, on average, were getting an hour less sleep than athletes on the home team.
Interesting.
So, conventional wisdom says that the home team wins because they're in their stadium or they got their fans behind them. Like, our data suggests it's just that they're more rested.
Very interesting. Have you guys worked with the NFL yet?
We're starting to make some progress there.
I mean, I know obviously there's big emphasis on concussion research and whatnot. But I mean, obviously these are elite athletes that are practicing hard every day, especially in the summertime, right? When, in, mini camps or training camp, these guys are in the heat. I don't know how many hours a day necessarily, but there's obviously a lot of data that you guys could probably gather on them. That would be vital in protecting them from injuries and dehydration and everything else. So, anything else that you want to throw in here before we wrap up?
Well, I would just say, if people are looking for more information on Whoop, they can find us at whoop.com, whoop.com, and we like to publish stories on some athletes that we work with, or ways to better optimize your body. You can learn more about our product there. So it's a good opportunity for anyone who is looking to sort of take their performance to another level to learn more.
I'll ask this question. We'll wrap up on this. What's been your favorite day so far as the founder of Whoop? Does one day in particular stand out?
I don't think I have a specific day. And one thing though I have to say is like it's a little bit of a challenge to being an entrepreneur, but you kind of keep moving the goalpost, if you will. You sort of think, okay, if I can just get this contract signed, if I can just get this customer, if I can just get this investor, and then it happens and you realize, well, actually no, I got to get this thing, I got to get this thing, I got to get this thing. So it's healthy for the business. It can be a little unhealthy for the entrepreneur, but you have to kind of keep looking past what you've just done. And so I think that's probably why no specific day comes to mind when you ask that question.
Hey, no worries. I mean, it's one big journey, and I know it's been probably 5 years, and some days it feels like 5 months, and some days it probably feels like five lifetimes. So,
Yeah, totally.
and then how do we connect with you online? Do you use any social media, or is there an email address that you'd want to share with the audience if they wanted to reach out to you personally?
Yeah, people can find me on Twitter at Whammies, WAHMMYS. I tend to look at that fairly often, and yeah, happy to follow up with anyone who has questions about Whoop or starting a company.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for being a guest. I am very tempted to buy my own strap. I am definitely not an elite
Yeah.
athlete. I'm not even an amateur athlete, and I can't even. My knees are so banged up I can't even run. But I'm enamored with data, and I'm just kind of curious to know what my results or analytics would show. So
Well, great. We'd love to have you on board.
thank you so much, man. Wish you guys the best, and anything big or exciting happens, you want to come back and tell us about it. Feel free. You're welcome back anytime.
I look forward to that. Thanks for having me, Jonah.
Thanks, man. Take care, Will. Bye.